Heavenly Father, we thank you for bringing us together this morning to study your word. We ask that you would pour your Holy Spirit out upon us, grant us the presence of the Holy Spirit that we can rightly understand the message that you have for us and the implications it has for our life. As Brother Chris is taking off traveling to Georgia, we ask that you give him traveling mercies and that you give Tabo the same as he heads back down here this morning from Canada. Please bless us by your presence. Give us some concrete thoughts to consider for this day as we go through it from these studies. We ask in Jesus' name, amen. I had some, I don't know how, did you put some scriptures into the Waymarks?
Yeah, into
Some of it.
chapter 1.
Okay, I had, the way that they had the meeting up there structured, Jonah did the first presentations and then his wife Michelle. And the first time Tabo was going to speak would be Friday night, but it was just a worship. So I listened Thursday night to Jonah and all day Friday to Jonah and his wife. And I started thinking about these chapters, and I think Daniel 1 through 6 pretty well put in place. So that's I'm going to put them in place the next couple of days, and we'll go back through them. And by being put in place, it's pretty profound stuff. I can see for me, and I was saying this before I left last week, I can see for me why the Lord stopped us on the sanctuary, because he needed to get the structure of Daniel in place to build on the binding off and stuff. I'm pretty sure that's what was going on. So Parminder coming here providentially and turning the study towards Daniel, I think was the Lord's hand. So I'll just give you an overview, and I'll use different colors, because chapters 1, 2, and 3, they go together, because you can't have the third angel's message without the first and the second. And they plug right into one line, but the other lines will go on top of them. But I'm pretty convinced now that 1, 2, 3, that Nebuchadnezzar is the United States, and that 4 and 5 is the everlasting gospel in Adventism, so kind of external, internal. And 6 is also probably more about God's people. But and there's maybe you picked them up while I was gone, but there's other little symbolic keys in these chapters that we hadn't been recognizing before I took off for Canada, that are in there that just begin to really pull this thing together. But right here, this is just an overview, okay? The troubling. There's a troubling going on at this. Maybe I shouldn't go there first. I got to go to Daniel 1 first. Let's go to Daniel 1 first. And we don't have to go there. I'm just going to put it in place. And you can help me with some of these things when I get to them. Those of you that are familiar with like Esther and Abigail, that in this history that teach these things. But I guess I ought to read through, so I make the points as we go. The first few verses there in Daniel 1, probably 1 through 4, of course, is a fulfillment of the prophecy of, is it? Yeah, but I'm thinking of the king. Which king is it? Is it Hezekiah?
Isn't it? Where he shows him all the things, all his
Hezekiah.
Okay, Hezekiah, and then also of Leviticus 26. And so I'll pass over that, knowing that that's an important part of it. And we know that in chapter 1, first test is diet, okay? Which, 9/11, are you going to eat the little book? And the second test is this 10 days that's visual. There's a nice verse in there on the visual that you may or may not have picked up before. So let me jump towards in verse 15. At the end of 10 days, their countenances appeared. Most times in the scriptures, appear or appearance or appeared is what? Mare. But this isn't. This is to see. But it's nice that countenances is mare. Because when they're viewed at the end of this 10-day visual test, their appearance is as of Christ. So their character is set. In the second test, because in here is going to be the third test, right? Where they manifest a distinction between themselves and the magicians, astrologers, soothsayers. You'll notice, of course, we know in verse 5 that we got the 4 generations with Daniel, Hananiah, and a name change. So put that up here, name change. I'm using red for chapter 1, meaning covenant, 4th generation, last generation, eunuchs, last generation. They're unable to produce another generation because they're a eunuch. 10 days. Okay, here at the beginning of this test, when about diet, you have the, I'm going to put Melzar's fear. Because the first test is sometimes expressed as the fear of God. Right? And that is in verse 11. Maybe not. It's in verse, I have it, 10. And the prince of the eunuchs said unto Daniel, I fear my lord the king. So 10 days, give them pause to eat. Let their, okay, so on 10 days, you have the 10 soldiers or whatever, the 10 men that David sent from Paran to Carmel. I'm not thinking of another 10. There's probably another 10. Do anyone know another 10?
The 10 Commandments.
Well, yeah, if you can use 10 to identify the test, there's a bunch of those. But I'm thinking of lines that have been opened up where there's a number 10.
I was wondering if Numbers 14:22, it is a 10. There's 10 times that they are tested by God. I wondered if that fit in that history. I don't know if we've ever tried to see if it fits there, but
They tempted God for 10
Yeah, it does fit in that history. I spent a day with Brother Theodore, and he has some nice thoughts. I was tempted even to share at least one of them this morning, but I want to put this in place so we can start working on it before the trimester is said and done. He gave me some lines, and I saw the one about numbers that he didn't give me, and I worked it out in my head last night. I'm not prepared to share it. I can share his other lines, but I can see that plugs in there too. He has noticed, I could tell him to do it, he's noticed that you could see it, it's correct. He's noticed that in the 4 generations, when you're dealing with the 4 generations, all right, we'll come back to this. I hope I don't misrepresent what Brother Theodore has found, but we didn't have a lot of time. I spent, what is this? This is Wednesday? So I spent pretty much all day long with Theodore and Kelly on Monday. And when I look at his material is chronology, history, those kind of things. And so when I'm listening to him present it, I'm seeing things not in the history and the chronology, I'm seeing it in prophetic. Okay, I'm either seeing where prophetic lines or prophetic patterns disagree or support what he's saying as I'm following him. And I could see things that he wasn't mentioning that would agree with what he was doing. And I don't know if he saw them or not. So anyway, when you're dealing with the 4 generations, one of the nice things that he's noticed that I pretty much think is valid, we start the first generation from 1844 to 1888 of Adventism. And then you got your second, and third, and fourth generation. But he's noted, and he's got some lines to show this, that in the first generation, there's always a failed reform movement. Okay, so he goes to 1851, and I don't know how hardcore he is on 1851, because in 1851 you can show that Sister White says the church is Laodicea, but sometimes people will argue it's 1849, or it's in that neighborhood. So he's not arguing strongly it's got to be 1851, but shortly after the covenant relationship's established, Sister White's saying we've fallen into a Laodicean condition, and to fall into a Laodicean condition means you no longer fear the Lord. Okay. And then there's going to be, this is the first waymark in an attempt to do a 3-step reform movement. Now when you see this, the logic of this, and we've mentioned this from time to time, but not in depth. Most of us in here know that Sister White says had all those virgins followed on unitedly in faith at 1844, they would have been in heaven ere this. So don't hold Theodore to anything that I'm going to say here, because he was just the numbers, but I was seeing things that are clicking in my mind. Maybe he sees them too. Maybe he sees them a little bit different. But from 1844, the disappointment, until 1850, you got 7 years there where the Lord's putting the second chart in place and beginning, he's organized the church. Now they're going to go public with this 50 chart. But in order for them to go straight into heaven, like Sister White has suggested, they got to go through the 3-step testing process. And so the first test for them is where they lost their first love. Okay, 1851, they lost the fear of God. And the second one is 1863, where they're confronted with these charts. The charts are put in place in 1842 and 1850, these 2 charts. Now, this is their visual test. They're going to replace these 2 charts with 2 tables. Because if you know, Uriah Smith didn't just print the 1863 chart, he also printed a chart of the 10 Commandments at the same time. So these are the 2 counterfeits. And so you got a doubling there. You got your 2 counterfeits coming in here to replace these 2 genuines. And he also published the manual, or whatever you call it, to explain the 1863 chart. The key, okay? And Habakkuk says that these 2 charts are going to speak, but the 1863 chart was unable to speak, so he had to print the key with it at the same time to explain the charts, also contributing to the idea that this is a counterfeit. And it is interesting that key that he published was 46 pages long, also a counterfeit, because if you were going to line this 3-step process up that I'm showing you here with 1844 to 1850, the second waymark in that history would be 1846 with the marriage, the Sabbath, and the change of name of Ellen White. So this little 3-step movement that we're marking here, it's got a 46-page key to explain the table that doesn't speak, and these 2 tables are a counterfeit of these 2 tables, so you got your doubling there at the second. And then the third is 1888. Okay, so he's got some other lines in these other illustrations that we use of the 4 generations where he can show this phenomenon happening in the first generation. The Lord attempts to repeat a 3-step testing process to carry him right into heaven, as Sister White is implying, but it doesn't happen. That's kind of nice. One of them that would be easy for us to see is probably is we would mark Manasseh as the first generation, all the way up to Jehoiakim, second generation. You know, if we're doing those four kings, Manasseh, Jehoiakim, Chin, and Zedekiah as a symbol of the four generations, from Manasseh to Jehoiakim, do you have the Lord attempting to bring about a reformation that fails? Josiah's right in there. So that's what I'm saying. He's got some interesting stuff about the fourth generation. There's more to that, but that's what I'm talking about. And I'll leave off and try to return to Daniel 1, 2, 3 and put that in place. 10 days judgment. Okay, so probably, not probably, but you got 3 tests in here, but you also have 3 years. So I'm going to put first year. This wouldn't be chronologically accurate, but Daniel and them are going to be trained in the tongue of the Chaldeans for 3 years. What are you guys talking about?
I'm saying that perhaps it would, because Michael did a presentation on that, and he showed how it would work.
Yeah, I went to establish the years of how to line up Joachim, Nebuchadnezzar, and Daniel.
Jehoiakim, Nebuchadnezzar, and Daniel.
To show where Daniel's standing, when his test ends, how much time it was.
Oh, so you're thinking all these are right square with the years. Cool. Yeah. And pardon me?
No, not the test, not the testing, not those tests.
Oh, that's what I was saying.
Yeah.
Okay, and then they're 10 times better here at the end of the test. And of course you plug in here the statement where Sister White says, the latter rain is coming as suddenly as the midnight cry, only with 10 times the power, something like that. Everyone know that quote?
Yep.
Okay, so the point here is, if you're going to use that Spirit of Prophecy quote, which we are, of course, Sister White, I don't know if Sister White put it in there after the fact or some editor did, but it says in that quote, if somebody wants to pull it up if you're not familiar with it, it plugs in suddenly with brackets. And that can either mean that Sister White went in after the fact and put that word in there, or usually an editor. Okay, go ahead.
You are getting the coming of the Lord too far off. I saw the latter rain was coming as, in brackets, suddenly as, the midnight cry, and with 10 times the power.
So
Spalding McGann 4.3.
So the thing I'm getting is, I don't know who plugged in suddenly, but this takes us to Malachi 3, when the messenger of the covenant comes suddenly to the temple. And what he's doing in Malachi 3 is he's purifying the Levites. And the Levites are both priests and Levites, because even the priests are Levites, right? So that brings that in there. And of course, we already know about fractals, where if we wanted to shoot this over, no doubt we could. 1 year fear, 10 days, visions. And he has, Daniel's given understanding in all visions and dreams here, which would be
Restoration of the spirit of prophecy.
restoring the spirit of prophecy. And okay, so the point is, we've done it in this class before, but it's pretty standard around here. We understand that the book of Daniel itself is the first angel's message, a symbol of the first angel's message. Ezekiel's a symbol of the second angel's message, Jeremiah of the third. So the book of Daniel's approach from that point of view. And chapter 1 of Daniel has all 3 steps of the first angel's message in it, if you're looking at it to apply it to Millerite history. But if you're looking to apply it to our history, when the 3 angels' messages of Revelation 14 are going to have their genuine fulfillment, then we have to take Daniel chapter 2 and lay it right over the top of this. And even Daniel chapter 3, because you can't have a third message without a first and a second. Follow the logic? Okay, so Pardon me.
The same text with suddenly is also manuscript 4, and there it's without brackets.
It's without brackets.
Yes, the same text.
That would tell me that. I don't know which one was first. I don't know what that tells
Spalding
me.
Magan, I think it uses this text. It's from 1852, and I think the reference is there in Spalding and Magan.
It's maybe when it was copied
Yeah.
from manuscript 4, it got put in and somebody edited it and it was like, oh, you missed a word.
In Spalding, it
I don't
makes.
No, he didn't miss a word. He's saying it's not in brackets
Yeah.
in one, but it's there in both of them.
Yes, in Spalding McGann they missed a word. That's what I'm saying. That they
Later.
copied from manuscript 4.
We don't know.
We don't know that. I'm just saying that's a possibility that when they put it onto the
But I think you need to check it because she was writing letters to
Yes.
Spalding again. That might have been a letter to him. That sounds like a manuscript where they went back in and they gathered them together and put him into a manuscript, and that actually the original Spalding McGann. I don't know what that would mean, other than I don't know what that means. Through an editorial glitch or a providential editorial action, this word is emphasized, and the entering in of the messenger of the covenant suddenly in Malachi 3, we already know, plugs into this history. He's purifying the sons of Levi in that history. So this color will be chapter 2. And we're going to put chapter 2 right over the top. And what I'm seeing happening, this is the binding off period, is Daniel is agreeing with everything that we put together out of Ezra 7:9 and Revelation 9 and 1 Samuel 25 and Sodom and Gomorrah. But he's expanding this binding off period because this is where the temple is opened and you move in. And I think he wants us to approach the identification of the open temple from the book of Daniel, or at least factor it in. So Daniel chapter 2, in verse 2, there is a call to the who? The foolish and wise, really. Yeah, it's a call to all of them, but who comes? Let's read Daniel. Well, let's start in verse 1. In the second year of Nebuchadnezzar, second year, second angel's message. Nebuchadnezzar, doubling. Dreams, doubling. And he's troubled. Okay, so the troubled, I'm going to put over here. And if this is the second angel's message, is that acceptable? Does that fit?
The arrival of the second.
Arrival of the second angel. Okay, and the arrival comes with the troubling. Second angel arrives. And for here, I go to Psalm 48 and 83, and we have the 10 kings being troubled, which I assume is the dragon. And in here we have Nebuchadnezzar being troubled, and in Genesis 41 we have Pharaoh being troubled. And I'm just going to put Daniel because he gets troubled more than once. He gets troubled in his dream in Daniel 4:2. And so I'm suggesting that this is the threefold union. It's a little bit squishy in terms of making a distinction. Pharaoh typically you would say was a dragon. The 10 kings you would say were a dragon. But these three entities are all there. So that happens a lot with the three enemies. They kind of move around what they represent. So I'd say that Nebuchadnezzar is the false prophet, the United States. And Pharaoh, the beast. I don't know. And the 10 kings, the dragon. Open for correction on that. But it's 9/11. That's when the troubling takes place. So he's troubled. His sleep break from him. Anyone that wants to can throw stuff in as we go through.
Can you just repeat that again? Nebuchadnezzar, you see as a false prophet?
Yeah, the United States.
Okay, and who's the beast?
I'm saying it's Pharaoh.
I don't
dragon because he represents the earth and the dragons.
Yeah, I don't have a problem. That's what I said. When you go to this, there's many illustrations of the three enemies in Bible prophecy. And sometimes, more than one time, there's a handful of times where the three symbols that you find that you know are representing the three enemies, that a couple of the symbols that you would think were should be this one or that one aren't. The reason I go with dragon here is at the generic level of the three enemies, you always have two singulars and one plural, and the plural is the dragon. Okay. So you got 10 kings here, or you got the kings in Psalm 48 and Psalm 83. I put Psalm 48 in because the east wind's what troubles them, but Psalm 83 because it shows the intent of their heart. And what's the intent of their heart in Psalm 83 of these 10 kings? Let's go to Psalm 83. It's about Zion and what they want to do with
48
Zion.
is where they have the intent.
48's where they have intent.
Psalm 48.
Okay, I'm in Psalm 48. Verse 4. I don't see the... Let's read Psalm 48. I don't see the intent I'm looking for. I don't know what you mean, my brother. But in verse 1 it says, "Great is the Lord and greatly to be praised in the city of our God and the mountain of his holiness." Verse 2 of Psalm 48 says, "Beautiful for situation, the joy of the whole earth is Mount Zion on the sides of the north, the city of the great King. God is known in her palaces for a refuge." Verse 4, "For lo, the kings were assembled. They passed by together, they saw it, and so they marveled. They were troubled and hasted away. Fear took hold upon them there, and pain as of a woman in travail. Thou breakest the ships of Tarshish with the east wind." Okay, so they're troubled at the east wind.
Psalm 83 is where you see the intent.
Yeah, Psalm 80, pardon me.
Taking crap.
Verse 4, Sister Brittany, what are you saying about?
Oh, well, he said verse 3. I guess it's 3 and 4.
You mean in Psalm 83? Yeah, okay. Let's just finish the thought on Psalm 48. Psalm 48 is these kings being troubled by 9/11. But okay, now Psalm 83. This is where the intent is. Sister Heather, you want to read verses 1 through 5? Psalm 83? Or Brother Noel, if you're there, it don't matter.
Keep not thou silence, O God, hold not thy peace, and be not still, O God. For lo, thine enemies make a tumult, and they that hate thee have lifted up the head. They have taken crafty counsel against thy people, and consulted against thy hidden ones. They have said, Come, and let us cut them off from being a nation, that the name of Israel may be no more in remembrance. For they have consulted together with one consent, they are confederate against thee.
And then it names off the 10 tribes. So what are they doing? What are the elements there in those 5 verses? They've come into a unity. Who are thy hidden ones in verse 3?
Represented by Elizabeth. It's God's people.
God's people. But why would they be hidden? Okay.
They kind of made the prediction that he's going to bring them.
Okay, I knew I would elicit those kind of responses, and they're probably accurate. What I'm getting at is, and I don't put any stock in Malachi Martin, but in his book Keys of This Blood, if you've read it, and you need a medal if you read it because it's long and lots of words. But there's a point where he's listing off the various Protestant churches that are going to come into agreement with the papacy in this 3-way struggle to take control of the world. And he mentions Adventism, and he says that in Adventism there is a little group of, and he has different words to say it than we say it, but he says there's a little conservative group in Adventism that won't bow down to this movement to bring all the churches together with the papacy, and he says these will have to be dealt with. Okay, this, among other things, is the story of the raising up of the church triumphant that begins here. But back here, this is still the church militant. And what is the primary definition of the church militant?
Still tares.
Wheat and tares. And what's the story about the wheat and tares?
You can't tell
They
me
grow
apart.
You can't see the wheat. I mean, you can see it, but you don't know whether
Can't
it's
see
wheat
the
or tare.
tares, right?
Yeah, so they're not after the tares. Tares are no problem. Tares weren't even sown by Christ. They were sown by Satan. The tares are already in their camp. They're after the hidden ones. They're after the wheat that's in their mix. And they're wanting to wipe out Israel's name. But the east wind changes course on them. That's the troubling. You follow that logic? So when it says that they let us cut them off, that the name of Israel may no more be in remembrance, when they're wanting to cut off their name, what are they wanting to cut off?
The covenant.
Clothes. It's not about the people, really. What's the name about?
Character of God.
Clothes. It's about the Sabbath. The Sabbath is a sign between He and His people. They're out to end seventh-day Sabbath observance.
That's why he uses the word remembrance.
Yeah, yes. That's why the word remembrance is in there. Okay, so their intent is to turn the whole world into a Sunday-keeping world at this point. And they know there's Advent, all the Adventists keep Sabbath, but they know the majority under pressure are going to come over to their side. But they also know there are some hidden in Adventism that are going to stand faithful. So their intent isn't for the tares. They're trying to deal with the hidden ones through Sunday legislation, but they get turned aside. So in Daniel chapter 2, Nebuchadnezzar, who I'm saying is the United States because it begins in the United States, he's troubled by this dream, and he calls in the four again, but this time it isn't Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Who is it? In verse 2. It's the magicians, the astrologers, the sorcerers, and the Chaldeans. So when you put chapter 1 in here, you're in the fourth generation, but you have both classes in there. When you're putting chapter 1 and chapter 2 together, Hananiah, Azariah, Mishael, and Daniel are the wise virgins, and the magicians, the astrologers, the Chaldeans, and the soothsayers are the foolish virgins. Right here, fourth generation, when the leaders are troubled. Okay, and there's a gathering in verse 2, and it says, so they came, this is the foolish virgins, so they came and stood before the king. And I'm putting the first test in this story is the standing. And I'm doing that because right here is where they stand up in Ezekiel 37 and other places. At the message of the four winds, they stand on their feet, a mighty army. Where do we see a mighty army standing on its feet? Where it's going to go through a purging. And how many purgings is it going to go through? Pardon me?
Ezekiel 37.
Gideon. Okay, how many purgings are there in Gideon? 2. There's 2 purgings. Okay, there's a big group of them initially. So this group's going to be purged, and then there's going to be another group that's purged. And when it's all said and done, you got Gideon's 300, and who do they represent? 144,000. Okay, so in Ezekiel 37, when the message of the four winds arrives, they stand on their feet, a mighty army, but it isn't the church triumphant. It's the church militant still. There's wheat and tares. There's going to be a purging. So I'm putting the standing as the first test, paralleling the wise virgins' 3 tests. The foolish virgins, the magicians' tests are being marked here. And therefore, in verse 4 and verse 7, I'm saying is the second test for the foolish virgins, or at least it's illustrated in the context of the foolish virgins. And there's a doubling, because verse 4 and verse 7 are almost identical. Verse 4 says, "Then spake the Chaldeans to the king in Syriac, O king, live forever. Tell thy servants the dream, and we will show the interpretation." Then if you drop down to verse 7, when they're going to answer him a second time, this is the doubling, it says, "Tell his servants the dream, and we will show the interpretation of." So I'm saying verse 4 and verse 7 is the doubling of the second test, because one of the characteristics of the second test is the doubling. And then the third test is the verses 10 through 13. This is where they answer the last time, verse 10, the Chaldeans answered before the king and said, "There is not a man upon earth that can show the king's matter. Therefore there is no king, lord, nor ruler that asks such a thing at any magician or astrologer or Chaldean, and it is a rare thing that the king requireth, that there is none other that can show it before the king, except the gods whose dwelling is not with flesh." So what I'm saying is, in Daniel 2, the three-step testing process is going to lead us to the same conclusion, has been illustrated in Daniel 1, the three-step testing process that leads it to here. But Daniel 1 is putting it in the context of the wise virgins. Daniel 2 is putting it in the context of the foolish virgins. And there's something very subtle in those verses that I just read that contributes to this history. What would that be, do you think? What is the magicians, what is their claim?
They're going to show an interpretation.
No, that's not the point I'm getting at. They're making a claim that no one can do this except the spirits that do not dwell in the flesh. Okay, so they're denying, they're saying we don't have any oil, but neither do these guys have any oil. Okay, they're at the point in the story where Korah, Dathan, and Abiram and their followers are saying, we're all the same. We're just as holy and righteous as Moses is, or Aaron, or Miriam. The only one could do that would be God that is not connected with flesh. And the argument is that Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, they do have the Holy Spirit in their flesh. And that's the argument of the parable of the 10 virgins, right? Because when you get down here, it's going to be manifested, as it is being manifested with these guys here, that they do not have the Holy Spirit. But at the same time, they're making this claim that nobody has it. Okay.
So where do we mark verse number 10 and 11 now?
This is the third test. This is right here. This is where their character is being manifested.
Okay.
This is the first test in this history. This is the second test in this history, verses 4 and 7. 4 and 7. And this is the third test. Third test in this history. And it's verses 10, is that through 12 probably? And I don't know how to summarize what that means, or a hook to put on it to mark it. Okay. No oil. That's a very good hook for that. So there's a decree passed right then and there. All right, they've come 1, 2, 3. So there's a decree here. Right? Everyone see that decree there? Okay. Arioch is interesting. Let's go into Arioch. We already marked Arioch before we left, but what I realized is that it's not, in both instances, at the beginning and the end, he's hasty. There's hasty marked, which gives you a stronger argument that this is the beginning and the end of a prophecy. Notice in verse 15,
Yes.
he answered and said to Arioch, the king's captain, why is the decree so hasty from the king? What is that, first off? The decree's here. And what is Daniel doing with Arioch? He's inquiring. It's both.
Yeah.
That's why I was going to make sure when I got back here I would do it. In the American English it's an I, but in King James English, it's an E and it's the same word. Okay? So then when when Daniel has it given to him in verse 25.
Before we mentioned the decree at midnight.
Yeah, well, we're not dealing with that element of it. I'm not threatened by lining it up this way, and still, when you get into the fine details of it, perhaps putting it at midnight, because at one level, midnight cry, same way mark. So we'll acknowledge that maybe this decree is here because you're.
Extra time.
Yeah, it's got to be there, but it's this. I think it's doing both things because you got an inquiry there too. But I get your point. We'll deal with that as we get over here. We could argue that through. Maybe it is absolutely and exclusively midnight. I'm not arguing that point at this point. But in verse 25, it says, "Then Arioch brought in Daniel before the king in haste." Okay, so both. This is letting us see both. The beginning of this binding off period and the end have the identical waymarks, which becomes an anchor for us after we have so many witnesses that this happens in the binding off period. And there's a name change in verse 26. It says, "Then the king answered and said unto Daniel, whose name was Belteshazzar, art thou able to make me known to dream?" This is an inquiry too. So if we're going to put the decree over here, then there's an inquiry with it here. And then when Arioch comes into the king, if the decree were here like I put it out, there's also an inquiry here by the king to Daniel.
The first was Isaac.
Pardon me?
First inquiry.
I know. Did I put name change? Name change would be here. Either way, the name change would be here, right? And when it's mentioned here, when Nebuchadnezzar is doing the inquiry, that's where he's Daniel, who is called Belteshazzar's mark. So there's a covenant relationship marked here. A little book to eat there, yes?
Have we ever marked the secret or like secrets? I feel like we've had presentations on that, but I don't know if we've put that as a waymark anywhere. Because he says there's a lot of secrets like we talked about here in like verse 22 and 28, and I figured it as like an anchor. Have you ever marked that anywhere?
Well, go through them in order. Verse 22 is the first one you're talking about?
I think so.
19 it says, "Then was the secret revealed to Daniel."
Then 22.
I'm just trying to glance upward to see if secret's mentioned before there. We want to put verse 18. that they would desire the mercies of God of heaven concerning this secret, that Daniel and his fellows should not perish. And what do we want to connect with that word perish?
Perish.
Perish with Esther. Okay, Esther, I'll do Esther in purple. Like Daniel, Esther wants time, right? Esther time, so if after the time she'll go into the king, and if she perishes, she perishes. Doubled. And Daniel asked for time that he might not perish. And how long does Esther fast for? What's her time marked as? Okay, and who does Esther hear this from?
Mordecai.
Oh,
The yeah.
Haytak or something?
Yeah.
What I'm looking for is like a second party. Who does Daniel hear it from? Arioch, second party. Neither one of them are hearing it directly, right? So that's also marked. Who does Abigail hear it from?
The young man.
One of the servants. So the Abigail, Esther, Daniel, same way marked. They're all hearing this message about the midnight cry problem from a second-hand person. It means something, no doubt, but what it does is it's giving you second witnesses that you're identifying the right waymark and placing the right characteristics upon it. What does it mean that you hear it from a second-hand source?
In the instance of Abigail and Esther, it puts them as Levites because they haven't experienced the history that precedes where they hear that. So I can't remember what we said about Daniel here, but it might put him as Levite.
That Daniel is illustrating.
Yeah, just in this chapter.
Yeah. I was thinking beyond that. Whatever this light is that comes to God's people at midnight, you would think they're getting it from the Bible and spirit of prophecy, right? At its most fundamental place. But what is the second-hand source that leads them to that? You notice I didn't respond to that foolish remark. I hope it wasn't picked up. Okay. Then it's in this history here. It's made known to Daniel. Okay, so I passed by secret. Let's run the thought of secret. The one thing that I know about this secret is Deuteronomy 29:29. The secret things belong unto God, but that which is revealed belong to us and our children forever. So this secret is being revealed. So whatever it is, now it is no longer a secret. It's revealed to us and we'll be held accountable for it, right? And the secret is no doubt a prophetic revelation that gets opened up. In verse, you got something to say about that, Sister Brittany? You brought it up.
I was just wondering if we could use it, like you were saying, you were looking for anchors, like where to mark this, and I thought we had presentations on this in the past, but I don't know if we've ever put it up there. But it's mentioned in verses 18, 19, 22, 27, 28, and 29.
Okay, we did verse 18. We got the parish, and we've now verse and 30. Someone said. Then in verse 19, the secret's revealed. I'm going to put Revelation. I'm putting these things over here. Revealed, secret revealed. I won't put Revelation. I got more room. But there's something else in there. Secret revealed. And when's it revealed?
The night vision.
Night vision. This is night. midnight to the midnight cry, dead of the night. So verse 22. I'm certain, I don't think it's going to be that difficult in verse 21 to figure this out, but I'm not seeing it yet, where it says he changes times and seasons. That's saying something to us. But the other part, he removeth kings and setteth up kings, that to me is an easy one. Sister White says from the rise and fall of kingdoms as set forth in the books of Daniel and Revelation. Okay, it's this setting up and taking down of kings that is the point of reference for solving these things. And this history we know is about setting up and taking down kings. So this statement, this praise, is identifying that. What the times and the seasons are. You know, this is the harvest time, which would be the summer for the Levites, but this is the harvest, the summer for the priest, but the summer for the priest is the spring for the Levites, so it may have something to do with that the fact that these seasons are overlapping in this history, these times. He changes times and seasons. Okay, next verse, Sister Brittany, 22. He revealeth the deep and secret things. And then what other verse on secret?
27 through 30.
Ariane, you want to read 27 through 30?
Daniel answered in the presence of the king and said, the secret which the king has demanded cannot the wise men, the astrologers, the magicians, the soothsayers shew unto the king.
So what does that mean? What's being done there? That's the distinction between the wise and foolish virgins is being marked. Okay, go ahead.
But there is a God in heaven that revealeth secrets, and maketh known the king to the king Nebuchadnezzar, what shall be in the latter days.
Now what that does is, how is he going to reveal to Nebuchadnezzar what's going to be done in the latter days? It's right here. It's right here. Okay, he's going to use this point of reference to reveal it to Nebuchadnezzar, right? But keep your finger there and read for us verse 14 of Daniel 10. Because the prophets all agree with one another. And this isn't Daniel revealing it to Nebuchadnezzar, this is Gabriel revealing it to Daniel.
Now I am come to make thee understand what shall befall thy people in the latter days, for yet the vision is for many days.
These are parallel passages, but what we know that in Daniel 10:14, the punchline of what is revealed about the latter days is Daniel 11:40 to 45. This is telling you that this history has to square with Daniel 11:40 to 45, because it's the same message. This is what befalls God's people in the latter days. But I would also add that in Daniel 2, when this dream is to reveal to Nebuchadnezzar what's going to be in the latter days, this is the external. Where Daniel 10:11, it's what will befall thy people in the latter days. This is what's going to befall the kingdoms of Bible prophecy. So you got two statements of the same thing, the kingdoms of Bible prophecy, external. This experience of God's people, internal. Okay, you can keep reading.
Thy dream and the visions of thy head upon thy bed are these. As for thee, O king, thy thoughts came into thy mind upon thy bed, what should come to pass hereafter. And he that revealeth the secrets maketh known to thee what shall come to pass.
One more.
But as for me, the secret is not revealed to me for any wisdom that I have more than any living, but for their sakes that shall make known the interpretation to the king, and that thou mightest know the thoughts of thy heart.
47. The king answered unto Daniel and said, of a truth it is that your God is a God of God, the Lord of kings, and a revealer of secrets, seeing thou couldst reveal this secret. But what I wanted to point out here is, what does Daniel say about this secret being opened up?
Who it's for.
Who it's for. It's not for God's people. It's for Nebuchadnezzar. And so one of the themes we've found in these Bible prophecies is there's a way that God's people's work is illustrated in terms of kingdoms. What is that? Who's Nehemiah? He's a cupbearer. Okay, there's a prophetic truth that's going to be opened up here that isn't for God's people, it's for the United States, it's for Nebuchadnezzar. And that truth is the cup where they're going to rise or fall. They're going to drink it, but one way or another they're going down or they're going to respond in repentance. This is the message here that is going to bring probation to a close for Nebuchadnezzar, who I'm suggesting is the United States. Now we're not at this point making a distinction whether it's the horn of Protestantism or the horn of Republicanism, but just taking it at a general level. Any other input on the secret? Decree, verse 12. First I made known. Pardon me? Okay. Pardon me?
Esther's identity was a secret, and then at the end of the second feast, she revealed it to the king. Like, I'm a Jew.
So what does that mean?
Well, we marked that on a small level at the midnight cry, and on a large level at Sunday law.
No, but I mean, yeah, but not where we place it. What does it mean that Esther was a secret? Who she was a secret.
She was a hidden one.
She was a hidden one. Okay, it means that whatever this is that's revealed to God's people, to the priests here in this history, that they present to the United States, it's going to project them into the public arena. They're not going to have been recognized before, but now they're going to be recognized. And Esther, she has 2 feasts here, right? Double feasts. And what else did you say about it?
It was the second feast that she told the king, I'm a Jew, don't kill me. He was doing this.
Yeah, and I don't know if there's an element of 2 steps there or if that's just a doubling. But it's at the second feast. Note that someone figures it out. So in this history, both Daniel's, Nebuchadnezzar knows Nebuchadnezzar knows who Daniel is. But Arioch comes in here and he says, I have found a Jew that can do this, as if it's here's someone I've discovered. Daniel is being lifted up. Okay, here is Esther's 2 feasts. Now they're being unhidden. And they got a message for the United States. And what's it do for Haman? It brings him to a conclusion, all right?
That is marked at the midnight cry. We're marking this, yes?
What are we marking?
The...
Don't ask me questions to try to
No.
set me up. Just tell me what you want to say.
Well, no, I'm trying to figure out in my head, because Nehemiah also, from midnight to the midnight cry, is doing his work in secret. So, I don't...
Is he doing his work in secret or is his work secret?
He's doing his work in secret.
His work is secret.
What's the difference?
Daniel here, he comes into Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah and says, this is what we got to do. We got to pray together. He's not hiding it from them. This is our problem.
Nehemiah hides it though. He says I made sure not to tell anyone except for a chosen few.
Chosen few.
Few is 3.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I think it marks up with the same thing.
In addition to the secret, in Judges 3, 19 and 20, you have Ehud, who has a secret errand into the king. He comes into the king, and everyone leaves, and then he stabs the king. I don't know if that
Cool.
helps, but
Yeah, this is the fall of the United States, and it's based upon his rejection of the message that's given to him. And a sword is God's word.
yeah. So you have this messenger of God.
What's
giving-
Ehud mean?
I don't know. I tell you, it's united. United States. Or to unify.
Yeah, well, there's a unity comes in here to the message. But anyway, that. So what did we answer? You're saying it's hidden from.
I was just marking the fact that there's Esther's having some sort of secret, Nehemiah has a secret, and Daniel's getting revealed secrets. Just that thought.
Okay, so when Daniel comes in, where does Daniel come to Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego to tell them? Okay, Desire 17. Then he went to his house, made it known to his 3 companions. I'm marking these here in this period of time because they are distinct from Daniel. And should not perish with the rest. Then was it, okay. Go ahead.
This is the same thing that happens with Abigail and Nabal. Nabal, who would, I guess, be the soothsayers and the astrologers, has this interaction with David, and he can't. There's not a good outcome to that, and David decides he's going to kill everyone like Nebuchadnezzar, and it's left up to Abigail or it's left up to Daniel in both of these situations to save the other class, or to save the other group, in their lives in these cases, not obviously spiritually, but it's the same thing where they come sort of to the rescue.
And when David's going to kill Nabal, what's he going to do?
Kill everyone that pisseth against the wall.
Pisseth against the wall. And what's the wall here?
The
At the small level. The marriage institution. Okay, so but in a big level from here to here, our first test would be 9/11, second midnight cry, third Sunday law. You follow what I'm saying? I'm getting outside of our study here. We need to eat the little book. Then we need to return to the old passages represented on these 2 tables. So second test in our history is built around these 2 tables. Okay, but with Belshazzar, the handwriting on the wall comes right here. Have you ever thought about it? It's the handwriting on the wall. Okay, right there. And what was written upon that wall?
Judgment.
Many, many, a doubling. Okay. So anyway, we got to get focused back on this, get it in place.
Rick brought out a point the other day I think it's just worth mentioning. Many Ziku Farson is Aramaic economic terms. It's the fall of the economy, and we're understanding the economy to crash at the midnight cry.
Yeah, it's both economic symbolism and weight. And I don't know what. The economics probably fairly easy to see. But what's the weight?
Could it be judgment that are found wanting?
Weight in the balances? And judgment through economic collapse, judgment and
Daniel applies the weight element on it because of the independence.
The weight and scales are economic terms as well, because you have to have just scales and balances when you're doing business.
Yeah.
National apostasy is followed by national ruin.
Yeah. Yeah, there's going to be national ruin right here. Only it's going to be worse right here. Okay, I don't know if you see anything else about the secret. Throw it in the mix. Name change decree. Where's Daniel? Where's Daniel at in verse 49?
He's
Gate.
made ruler over everybody. He's standing before the king.
He's sitting at the gate, right where Mordecai's seated. So what, you want to make a point about him being ruler?
No, I thought
No, I'm asking what you want to say.
I thought you were saying what position is Daniel in? Not
what-
what position.
Yep. In verse 46, when Nebuchadnezzar hears this, what's he do?
Falls on his face.
Okay, so
Which is midnight cry. Midnight cry.
yeah, in one level they're going to fall in the dust and be as dead, but this is Nebuchadnezzar. This is the United States. They're going to be crippled. They're going to fall at the midnight cry. Their complete fall is at the Sunday law, as typified at the midnight cry. Nebuchadnezzar's falling here. I mean, I realize that Nebuchadnezzar is symbolizing someone that is being converted to the truth here, but he's also illustrating what's happening to the United States as Daniel gives him this message that is represented by a cup that he has to drink. So I think I put everything in there that I wanted to put in there. In verse 49. So I'm placing all of this coming to a conclusion here, Daniel 2. Okay, so in verse 49, what does Daniel do to his three friends? He gets them promoted, right? But I'm just going to mark that also as that these three arrival of the third angel. Okay. Any other thoughts? We did not deal with the breakdown of the image, but that's purposeful on my part. So Nebuchadnezzar the king in chapter 3 made an image of gold. So in verse, whose turn to read? Not many people have read. You want to read, Sister Tiffany? Read verse 2 and 3
Sorry.
of chapter 3.
Then Nebuchadnezzar the king sent to gather together the princes, the governors.
So there's a gathering. We want to find out where this gathering is. Sorry to interrupt you. Start with princes again.
The princes,
1,
the governors,
2,
and the captains, the judges,
4,
the treasurers, the counselors, the sheriffs,
7,
and all the rulers
8.
of the provinces, to come to the dedication of the image which Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up.
What's the image test? It's the second test. So this chapter 3 is starting right here, right where the third angel arrived, because chapter 3 is the third angel. There's a gathering.
There's eight of them, which is a significant number.
Yeah, but it ain't done yet. The 8 ain't done yet. Okay, so isn't done yet. Go ahead, verse 3.
Then the princes, the governors and captains, the judges, the treasurers, the counselors, the sheriffs, and all the rulers of the provinces were gathered together unto the dedication of the image that Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up.
So you got...
Wait.
And they stood before the image that Nebuchadnezzar had set up.
Okay, so there's an 8 doubled in these two verses. Okay? And now these people are standing, marking a parallel to this. Okay? 3-step testing process. But the 8 is doubled. What is this 8? This is, from here, just on these doubled 8s, you can really go a long ways. Here, we know that this is the second waymark is the image test. Nebuchadnezzar now is setting up the second image in this story because these 3 chapters are all one chapter. You can't have a third without a first and a second. So you've already had an explanation of Daniel 2's image right here by Daniel to Nebuchadnezzar. Now you're going to get a solid gold image. Solid gold image here is because this image that he sets up here, the image of the beast in the United States, it's this image applied to the last days, and it's the history of 1798 to the end of the world and all the kingdoms that exist from 1798, including the papacies, in that conclusion of its history in 1798, they're all Babylon. So it's solid gold. So it's in agreement with this image that's being set up is modern Babylon. And I lost my thought there. Midnight Cry, verse 2, 3. Oh, okay, so who are these 8 people that are doubled? These 8 entities that are doubled? Priests and Levites? No. No. What are they doing there? The image is being set up. Okay, so this is the image, the setting up of the image.
They're watching.
But that
it
isn't,
happen.
they're watching it happen. Who are they?
They may be the 11th hour workers.
Not maybe, they're not the 11th hour workers.
Okay. They're equal.
Yeah, the 11th hour workers is the right answer. All right, but I was thinking, saying it a different way. What goes on from midnight to the Sunday, midnight cry to the Sunday law? Let me put it.
Those people are watching. 11th hour workers are watching the Nethinims.
That's probably spelled wrong.
Oh, the joining of the testament.
What is that?
Jebel.
Oh.
Or you could put it like this. Lot of
Sheba. Yeah.
lines that identify this history and what's going on in this history. It's the plowing of the 11th hour workers. But what does Jeroboam mean?
Flock or contention.
Okay, so this is the second flock, and this is the contention, the image of the beast contention that draws the focus of all the world, the whole world. When the whole world knows about 9/11, right?
Mm-hmm.
When Islam strikes again at the midnight cry, and it's going to cripple the United States, according to the story of Balaam, and it's going to be at least as doubly bad as 9/11, is the whole world going to watch what happens here?
Yes.
Okay, so this is where the world's getting its focus turned on this image of the beast testing time in the United States. So I'm saying these 8 that are doubled, it's the world that watches what goes on from here to here. The kings, the governors, the whole world are there. And in the history of Nebuchadnezzar, they didn't have internet or TV or radio. But what went on there in the plains of Dura, where did it go when it was all said and done? All the world. Those guys all went back to their own nations, and you know that's what they were talking about. You would not believe what we just saw in the plains of Dura. What's Dura mean? There's homework. Pardon me?
I'm looking it up right now, and some things. Others have believed that the name to indicate a portion of the actual site of Babylon within the Great Wall of the city, perhaps the rampart designated Dor Suana, the rampart of the city.
Okay, where I was looking, it says it's a circle.
It's circle dwelling.
Which
Circle
would mean
dwelling.
a circle dwelling. Okay, so there's, maybe we can see a wheel within a wheel there, all right? So let's go to verse 19, because we're running out of time, and I want to have this at least put in place as a launching pad for the next couple of weeks. Verse 19 of chapter 3, Sister Allison.
Then was Nebuchadnezzar full of fury, and the form of his visage was changed against Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Therefore he spake and commanded that they should heat the furnace 17 times more than it was want to be heated.
Okay, so where we passed over a lot of verses, I know. I wanted to read 2 and 3 to get the 8 in place. But where is Nebuchadnezzar's image, visage? What is visage changed?
Countenance.
Where is that? Where do we place that? Here.
Midnight Cry. I think, right?
Well, it could go to both, couldn't it?
Well, yeah, but no.
When the United States speaks as a dragon.
Yes, his visage changes right here. Okay, now he's going to heat the furnace 7 times hotter, right? And we went through this earlier. This is the argument that says that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in chapter 3 are the 11th hour workers. They get thrown into the flaming fire furnace here. But if his changing visage, this becomes something you can watch for in the book of Daniel. The change of countenance becomes a symbol. Here, although he's been doing it all along, this is the end of the line. Here's where the United States has officially and fully changed from a lamb to a dragon, speaking as a dragon. And in agreement with that, a dragon being the symbol of persecution, that's what he's illustrating. This is the beginning of the Sunday law persecution in earnest. Verse 15, back up to verse 15, Brother Henry.
Okay. Now if ye be ready, that at what time ye hear the sound of the cornet, the flute, the harp, the sackbut, psaltery, and the dulcimer, and all kinds of music, ye fall down and worship the image which I have made. Well, but if ye worship not, ye shall be cast at the same hour into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. And who is that God that shall deliver you out of my hands?
Okay, so what are the elements in there? Go.
I'm just seeing that he says, and who is that God that shall deliver thee out of my hands? Isn't that also what Pharaoh kind of says when Moses comes to him and says, let my people go? Doesn't he also say, who's that God who can deliver you out of my hand?
And
Yeah.
that's interesting that you make that connection because Nebuchadnezzar knew God and his power, and by this point he had been led astray by his counselors, so he was virtually saying, who is God? He's lifted up in pride. It's interesting.
That's not what I'm getting at though. What out?
There's a hearing.
The hour.
The hour. This is the hour. What do you mean there's a hearing? Oh, the music?
Yes.
Okay, the music plays.
7 instruments.
7 instruments. So what would that tell you? What's the music?
It's the Isaiah 20.
Isaiah 23.
She sings like a harlot.
At the end of this kingdom, the United States, the days of one king shall be as 70 years. She's going to go out and sing her song again. So the music is Isaiah 23. It's the experience. But there's one other thing in there at least.
Sing, the song of Moses and the Lamb you're talking about?
No, I'm talking about hands. Who can deliver you out of my hand? Who gets delivered out of Edom, Moab, and Ammon?
Shadrach, Meshach.
Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. This is Daniel 11:41.
Yep.
They're being delivered. They escaped the hand of the papacy in verse 41 at the Sunday law. Who shall be able to deliver thee out of my hands? Okay, and you might also put in there that this is at a specific time. Okay, so at what time you hear this. Back up one verse, and Sister Pam, verse 14.
Nebuchadnezzar spake and said unto them, Is it true, O Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, do not ye serve my gods, nor worship the golden image which I have set up?
Why is he asking them that question? I know we're going backwards, but that's okay. We know this chapter. What has just happened to them?
They were just ratted out by the...
Ratted out. Let's put accusation. There's an accusation that comes here. But what is Nebuchadnezzar doing? He's inquiring. And of course, Sunday law is another fulfillment of the parable of the 10 virgins.
So we're here in verse 14 at the Sunday law, and he looks back and says, when the image of the golden image was set up, so he's looking back to the midnight cry. That's my question.
No, if you go back to verse 7.
Mm-hmm.
They've laid out the ritual and the consequences, and in verse 7 it says, therefore at that time when all the people heard. So this is the Sunday law.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, the sound of these instruments, they were to fall down. He's already set it up. This is the history where the image of the beast is set up, but now is the time. I'm going to put time in there.
So verse 14 is at the son-in-law, but he looks back like...
Yeah, but before you get there, so you can see the context, it's, in verse 8 it says, "Wherefore at that time certain Chaldeans came near and accused the Jews." He's not going to do anything except it gets revealed to him, this accusation. You know, you played the music, these guys didn't bow down. So you're standing there in the history of the Sunday law. There's an accusation against the 11th hour workers. And in verse 14, he's saying, is it true? There's your inquiry.
Verse 10, you've got a decree.
And
Verse 10, you've got a decree. And verse 8, what?
There's an accused.
Yeah, that's the one I'm marking up
You
there.
wrote that one just then.
That's the one I knew about that and just referenced it. Verse 10 says, "Thou, O king, thou, O king, hast made a decree that every man," past tense.
Yeah, I see.
Where would that decree be?
Well, I was thinking Midnight Cry.
Midnight Cry. It's implicit in the idea that he's setting up this image in here, and once it's all set up, there's going to be a time where you have to bow down at the music. So the decree is back here.
But is the accusation not at Midnight Cry also?
No, because in it's after the fact. The accusation. Where did you just read the
8.
Yeah, wherefore at that time certain Chaldeans, but verse 7 is therefore at that time the music played. So verse 7, the music plays, that's the Sunday law. Immediately thereafter, in verse 7 or 8, the Chaldeans accuse them. Okay, and they're reminding the king that you made a decree back here, you played the music, they didn't bow down, you got to deal with them.
This is a really good illustration of the progressiveness of the Sunday laws. You can see that they're made at the Midnight Cry, but it sort of all goes into effect at the Sunday law, or at least the big Sunday law. Even.
Yeah, the big Sunday law.
I understand Ariane's question because I think in Daniel 6...
Don't go to
Elias
Daniel
said,
6, just tell us.
the accusation, he plays it at the Midnight Cry.
Well, this accusation is here, but this is fractalized, if that's a real word, back here too. So you shouldn't be shocked if there's an accusation here also, right? But let me make sure we got these all in note, because there's a gathering in verse 13. They're brought before Nebuchadnezzar. And the accusation, and then in verse 21, they're bound. Okay, so they're being bound in this hour. This is their binding off. And of course, we know their clothes don't change. If they go in the fire, they come out with the same clothes. So their character has been set before they're thrown in the fire. If they did not have a character prepared for that crisis, they would have burned up. But they were bound. And there is what's verse 29? "Therefore I make a decree that every people, nation, and language which speak anything amiss against so on and so forth." What's that?
Universal.
What is it, Sister Brittany? It's a counter decree. Do we have any other counter decrees at the Sunday law? Esther. There's a counter decree. Not that I know what that will be.
What verse is that?
It's the last verse, verse 49.
20.
Therefore, 29. "Therefore I make a decree." And then it's saying, if you go against Daniel's God, you got problems. Of course, that wasn't a holy decree, but it is still a decree that's counter to his original decree.
Did you get the gathering?
Why do I?
Verse 21.
It's
Okay.
verse 12. Or verse 21, is that what I said?
They are bound.
No. I'm in verse
13,
13.
and bringing Shadrach, Meshach,
Yeah,
and
then they
Abednego.
are all easy on the foot.
Yes, verse 13. And I have one other note in here. In verse 14, at the inquiry, which is right here, and this may not fit because it's after the fact, but you have Nebuchadnezzar speaking. If Nebuchadnezzar is the United States, this is where the United States speaks. So these three chapters line up perfectly under the context of what we understand the three angels' messages as. And I would submit to you that this is an illustration of the external, and that chapters 4 and 5 is an illustration of the same history, but it's internal. It's about the wise and foolish virgins. And chapter 6 is just another layer right over the top to pull them all together. One thing that you might look for if you read through this before tomorrow is the word astonished that's in here repeatedly. And if you go into the rest of the scriptures and look at astonished and astonished, you're going to see some really nice passages that contribute to it.
I think it's pretty cool that we looked at Daniel 1 and it's mainly 9/11, that time period. Then Daniel 2 is mainly Midnight Cry, and the third one is Son.
Yeah, but at the same time, they're all connected together. You can't have a third without a first and second. Yeah, this is pretty profound stuff. It isn't an accident that we got brought back here to this particular element of study. Sister Tiffany, you want to have a closing prayer?
Father in heaven, Lord, thank you so much for your word, that it's lighting our pathway and showing us, Lord, the things that you would have us know before the time comes, which our characters will be put through some serious testing. And Lord, we just pray that each day as we study these things that we would have them so clear and so written on our hearts that we would get through those trials, because you've promised it, Lord, in your word, that we would be able to come out forth as gold. And so just be with us, Lord, today. Help us to apply the lessons into our daily lives. In Jesus' name, amen.